I realized I was missing a golden opportunity to brag on this man right here. And I am so thankful that I get to introduce you to my husband of going on 12 years? Maybe, yeah, somewhere in there. 12 years, right? And he and I met when we were 15. So it's been a while, right? And when I tell you that there was a certain point in time where I hated him, right? I used to genuinely fantasize about smothering him because there was so much hatred and anger. And now here I am. I get to brag, right, that I am honored to be married to this absolutely amazing man of God. And I'm excited for you guys to hear his testimony and what he's done.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I set it down here because I didn't want to. I don't know. I felt weird going up here. Well, I'd have to change the camera. It's too late now. I set this. Now I'm down here for good. Golly, I wasn't actually prepared for my wife to brag on me, so now I got to readjust myself a little bit. Also got to make sure that my mic placement is correct because otherwise Steve will never let me live it down. Thanks, Steve. All right, let's start out with prayer. Lord, we thank you for this time. We thank you for worship, Lord, and fellowship, and that we get to gather here together, Lord. And I pray that you'll use the story that you've given me to be able to help encourage others and to help lead them to you, remembering that that all of this is for your honor and your glory, Lord. We thank you for it. In your name, amen. All right, so, man, I'm going to start pretty much back at the beginning. I was raised in a home, a Christian home. My parents were both Christians. My grandpa was a Baptist pastor, and so I grew up in a very stoic Christian family. There was only two emotions, happy and anger. Anything else wasn't really considered safe. And so growing up, wasn't really emotional repression, but it was definitely a lot of you really don't fluctuate too high one way or the other. Grief is something I still struggle with to this day. I have to almost talk myself into grief when I should be grieving because it's so difficult for me to recognize when that needs to be a thing. So still working on a lot of that stuff, and I'm very grateful for where God has brought me. And as I go through the story, you'll kind of see some of the points that he really did a lot of work in my life. Let's see here. So I had 4 younger brothers. There was 5 of us. My mother did not murder us, she had every chance and opportunity and probably right to many times. And she even protected us by putting buckets on our heads when we were having rock wars. So she could have let nature take its course, but she chose to protect us anyway. So I was very grateful for that. Growing up, like I said, I had 5 younger brothers. We're all within 8 years of each other. I love my brothers now. We have pretty good relationships. But back then it was a little bit different where I was kind of the indoor kid. I liked to read books and play video games and watch movies and talk about the books and video games and movies I was, watching or reading. My brothers like to be outside. They like to go dig in holes, climb trees, the kind of the typical boy stuff. And they kind of traveled as a little pack, led by the second born brother, who he rallied them all. And, they wrapped me up in duct tape one time. And, it was great. Yeah, it was a great time. It was all good fun, but it really sucks when you have hair on your arms and you're pulling the tape off. But yeah. Yeah, so my brothers, and I, we grew up in the house, like I said, thankfully, I'm so grateful for the house that my parents did, raise us in. Maybe there was not a lot of emotional variance in life, but at the very least, we were safe. I can't complain. I hear so many stories about people who had really traumatic childhoods, and all I can really say is that, I'm very grateful to my parents and for God for putting us in a place where I got to grow up in a safe home. Very early on, I remember feeling very lonely, and that was probably a slight byproduct of being homeschooled, my mom not being very social, my dad not being very social, and then my brothers kind of forming that little pack kind of leaving me inside, which, I had every opportunity to go join my brothers, right? But I wanted to be inside, and so that's what I did. But I remember feeling very lonely, and even, I have very early memories of just feeling very intensely lonely. To like, as a kid, okay, I'm not supposed to cry. So then you go hide in your room and cry, and then you be done with it. It's like, okay, now I can go do the regular emotional movement that I'm supposed to be doing in life. And so that loneliness kind of followed me through most of my early years. I can't really say I had really any good close friends as a child. Here and there, my mom tried. She tried to bring us to different homeschool events and different church groups and that kind of thing. But, it was always kind of difficult. And we church hopped a lot, so there wasn't a lot of like relationship being able to be formed amongst the other kids, and that was really tough. So what I even remember, I guess to preface this part too, I was a heavy-duty thinker. Even as a kid, I overthought everything. I still overthink everything. I'm sitting there worshiping, and in the back of my mind, I'm still overthinking this. So, that's just every day. It's all thinking, internal monologue, constantly rolling. But even as a kid, I remember sitting on the front porch of my parents' house, really, really concerned about dying. But I was not concerned about dying because I was afraid I wasn't going to go to heaven. I was afraid that I was going to go to heaven and I was going to be bored. I I was like, man, gonna go up there and sit on a cloud for all eternity? That sounds super dull. Like, I don't want to do that. But I actually had an epiphany even at that moment of a 12-year-old. And actually, I wasn't even 12. I was probably like 11, 11, 12 years old. And I remember thinking, like, well, if God made eternity for us to join him, it's probably going to be fine. I'll probably be all right. But I had to like workshop that, as an 11-year-old out on the porch by myself. I had to think about that. So needless to say, I live a lot in my head, and that has. And then when I feel lonely, and you already have a tendency to live in your head, you kind of start to develop some really easy spirals into negative thinking. And some of that started to come to a head when I got into my teen years. And as you know, when we hit our teen years, your hormones are going crazy. You look terrible. You feel terrible. You think everybody thinks you look terrible, but nobody actually really cares that much. But you think everybody does. So you're kind of going through life. You're feeling lonely a little bit. And then on top of that, now you feel terrible to kind of match how you feel on the inside a little bit. So at 13 and 14 years old, I actually started to somehow gather some friends. I don't really know how it happened, but we moved to a new house where we were actually in town, and I have a friend who I'm not going to name his name, but I had a good friend back then who came over to my house and said, "Hey, you look like fun. Let's hang out." And I'm like, I'm a homeschool kid. I'm 13. I don't have any friends. And there's this guy who walks up and like, "Hey, we should hang out." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Let's do this." Like I'm not an introvert, like I'm not a really strong introvert, but he was like the epitome of extrovert. And so he came up to me and he started hanging out, and I started hanging out with him and a couple of other friends, and we were good friends. We hung out. We did a lot of cool stuff together. I actually really enjoyed a lot of that time, but we started getting into what teenagers often get into around that age, where we started drinking and smoking. His mom was a smoker. She bought us cigarettes all the time. We had other friends who had parents who would buy us booze all the time. And we never really did anything, or in those early years between like 13 to like 15, 16 years old, we never really did anything that was like really bad. We didn't get into trouble with the cops. We didn't go vandalizing things. We didn't go around hurting people. We kind of would just, whatever person's basement was available, we'd go hang out in there and play video games until we went to bed. That was our nights. But somewhere around 16, 17 years old, I started getting into partying a lot more. Started getting more involved with girls, which that's a dangerous topic. But one of them being that one right there. So we met at 15, and we started dating on and off and on and off and on and off and on and off and on and off, somewhere in that region. So that was kind of a nice little semi-consistency, but I guess to some degree, I don't know. That was terrible. It was bad. It was not a healthy thing. And so what ended up kind of happening is even with all of the kind of the friends that I started to formulate in the friendships, I really started to rely on alcohol, weed, and those parties to make me feel like I was forming connections. I didn't really, but deep down I kind of knew that they were all very superficial. I kind of knew that, the second that I stopped any of those things, that those people probably wouldn't hang out with me anymore. And, unfortunately, that was true to some degree. But we can get back to that more later. So around 18, my parents strongly encouraged me to leave. They did not kick me out, but they said, "We think you should find somewhere else to live." And I went, okay. So I moved out to my own apartment, and as an 18-year-old, borderline alcoholic, I was perfectly fine with that because that just meant I could drink without my parents coming down on me. And that's what I did. And I managed to hold down a job somehow, but I steadily became a very functional alcoholic where I would work, get home, get drunk, go to bed, wake up, still partially drunk, go to work, get home, start drinking again. And and in my mind, I'm like, as long as I'm not drinking during work, I'm probably fine. It'll be okay. And that really became obviously not true when I had a friend graduate about a half a year later, and he moved in with me, and we spent a month. We calculated it out. I think we were sleeping. I think we were sleeping maybe an hour a night, up until about the weekend where we would party most of Saturday and then fall asleep at 4 a.m. on Sunday, sleep all of Sunday, and then wake up and go to work. And then we just keep on repeating that pattern. You start seeing things after, I think, about 2 weeks. You start wondering what that is in the side of your vision, and wondering why things are talking to you that aren't actually talking to you. Not a great time. But anyway, so that was thankfully only for about a month, and he left. And when I don't have anybody to stay up late and talk to and drink with, I fall asleep a lot sooner, apparently. So I started getting a little bit more sleep after that. Somewhere in all of that, Dana moved across the parking lot from me, which, again, probably not a great time. But somewhere between one of our on-again, off-agains, she ended up getting pregnant with our firstborn, which, for those of you who have met Kieran, that was Kieran. And, at that point in my life, I really didn't really know what to do. I was like, well, I'm working a kind of a crappy job at a grocery store, and I'm drinking all the time. I don't think I should really be behaving like this, I guess. So I tried, the first thing that I thought really was hey, I'm gonna move in with her, and we're gonna make this work out, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's what I was in my mind. That's what I told myself I had to do. I'm like, well, we better figure out a way to support this kid. So we moved in together, and we moved to Hutchinson, that was also very unhealthy. Again, I was still very much a consistent, semi-functional alcoholic, where I was basically just drinking all the time. I gave up weed about a year earlier because it made me paranoid and twitchy, and I just wasn't able to handle that very well. So I was like, well, I guess something's got to go. I guess it's got to be this one. Alcohol puts me to sleep eventually, so I'll just deal with that. Anything to keep me out of my head. And that's really what all of that really did. It really kept me outside of my head so I didn't have to think. And I didn't, which was very obvious, because eventually Dana and I moved in together, and as we're going through our life, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to school, because I got to get a better job than this, so I might as well go to school. So I added school. Still drinking, still school, still work, and when I get home, I didn't spend time with her, because that would have been a good thing to do probably, but I didn't spend a lot of time with her. In fact, I ignored her most of the time because I knew that she was angry, maybe somewhere deep down. I think consciously I didn't recognize it, but deep down I think I knew. And so I'm like, well, I don't really want to talk to her because she kind of brings down the vibe. So I'm just gonna drink, and that'll be fine. And then I'd play World of Warcraft, or I'd go to a party, one of those two things. And then when Kieran was finally born, terrible dad at that point in my life. I barely woke up when he cried in the morning. I was really bad. I was really selfish. And that kind of was another hallmark of a lot of my high school and post-high school age range, was it was just a lot of selfishness and a lot of trying to escape any modicum of discomfort that I felt in my internal life. So Dana and I broke up, which was good. Yeah, big surprise. Anybody who saw us continue in our relationship saw that was coming. She moved out. She moved in with her her parents, and I kind of held on to the apartment for a little while before moving back in with mine. One of those days I went out and I was drinking with friends, and pretty standard stuff at this point. As you drink a lot, eventually your bar tab gets larger and larger to get you drunk. So you spend a lot of money. But one of the things that happened that night was Dana and I had been broken up for a little bit, and I had started kind of getting together with this other girl, and I kind of was bragging about it a little bit with the other guys because trying to puff the chest up type behavior. It was stupid. But one of them liked that girl, and so he was turned around and started telling her everything I was saying, which eventually turned out for the better. So I woke up that next morning very hungover, and I read the text messages, and she was very unhappy with me, which every right to be. She had every right to be angry. And I'm laying on the couch, and I'm reading those text messages, and I kind of just read through them, not feeling anything at that point except a raging headache. And eventually I kind of get through and there was a long stream of texts too. I was like, man, it was like a weekend thing, and you're going to throw this book at me? That's what's going on in my head. And I look, I put my phone down, and I'm just laying in this empty apartment. Essentially, there's a couch and a few other objects in there, and I didn't even have the TV in there at that point. I was kind of slowly moving back to my parents, and I'm laying on the couch, and I just kind of sighed, and I was like, man, I don't know. It really, really hit me at that moment where I'm like, if I keep doing this, I'm dead. Like if I stop drinking, I'm gonna probably kill myself because I can't imagine even trying to figure this out soberly. I feel alone because the friends that I thought I had are willing to betray me in this way, which again, they told some, which again, I don't fault them for what they did at all. And then on the other hand, I'm incredibly depressed, anxious, all these types of things, all these things that have kind of followed me through my life. And I've, besides the alcohol addiction, I can't quit smoking, and besides the smoking, I can't quit porn. And so I have all of these addictions in my life that are causing me to recognize that there's something very unfulfilling going on inside. And I am like, man, I can't do this. I can't do this at all. like that was weird. It was weird at that moment. I recognized my own deficiency, and I had to be like, okay, well, if I am like this, what's the alternative? If I can't die, where do I go? And so I am laying on that couch, and again, I grew up in a Christian home, so we were bouncing around between churches, so I had all the right language, right? I knew to pray, I knew Jesus, I knew all these things, I knew all these words, and I'm laying there on that couch, and I'm like, Lord, if you're there, if you want to listen to me, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for not, because I've kind of ignored you, and I'm laying on that couch, and I say, and I'm just praying, and I'm like, Lord, I'm going to die if I keep moving this way. I need your help. If you'll help me, I'll try to follow you the best that I can. And I'd love to say that everything kind of just shifted at that point, but in reality, not a lot did. I definitely felt like there was some kind of a release at that point. Definitely was very lighter, but I still got drunk that night, so nothing really changed drastically at that moment. But what did end up happening is stuff started to slowly fall away. I recognized that as I continued to start praying and I started to attend a local church, I started to, I had one friend who was willing to talk to me, Steve back there, which I'm very grateful for his friendship during those times, because him and I would sit in his car at school, because I was still going to school, and we'd smoke cigarettes and talk about God. And that was really, we had some really intense theological conversations in that car. Still do, yeah. But it was... Yeah, different. Definitely a different car. Yeah. I still feel like I left my phone in that car, but I don't know. Anyway, so I started to, he actually was the one who invited me to that church, and that was Riverside Assembly of God, and I started attending, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna attend here. Like, this is fine. I'm like, I don't really know a whole lot right now. I'm just gonna keep praying, and I'm gonna go to church, and I learned a lot there. We had a great pastor. Named Pastor Lee, who was a great Bible teacher, and I learned a ton. And I started to really find myself it always sounds kind of cheesy when I say it, but I really found myself falling in love with the Lord and, recognizing reading his word was for us to be able to read. It wasn't written, to us, but for us. And so I was really getting to enjoy his word and recognizing what those relationships in a church could be like. And I started to gather pretty close friends, and some of them I still have to this day. And so what was, what was it? What ended up happening is I started to just it's almost like God was shedding stuff off of me. I was like, first it was like a lot of the internal stuff, a lot of anger and bitterness and loneliness and depression and anxiety, and everything that caused me to just shrivel up on the inside was like getting pulled away. And, and that went first. And then eventually the smoking left, and eventually the drinking left, and eventually the porn left. And, I'm saying these things like they're short, but this took years and years and years to get to these places. I mean, porn was like a year and a half to 2 years ago, where that one finally got kind of brushed away. And, drinking was 10 years ago, something like that. And smoking was almost 12 now. So, it took time. And there's a lot of other stuff that God continues to work in me. Apparently, I can't remember the word now. I'm blanking on it. I'll get there. Apparently, gluttony is a problem that I had. Didn't realize I had a gluttony problem, but apparently I had a gluttony problem. And so, I've been working through that, and as I've been going through different, small groups and CR and stuff, and I'm starting to recognize these things, I get to work through this stuff with another group of men that I get to honestly say I have some really good friendships with. And I'm very grateful that I decided to stay here and help out the Mondays and really get to be impacted by this ministry, which I'm super grateful for. But yeah, anyway, so, after that kind of pivotal moment of laying on the couch and recognizing that I was going to die if I didn't, follow God, essentially, God started really shifting my view. And one of the best things that ever happened to me was I started bringing my son to church on my weeks, and then Dana decided, hey, I want to make sure that he's not going to a cult. So I better go check what's going on over here. And so she did. Thankfully, she found that it was not a cult. She actually started staying, and she ended up getting saved on Good Friday. So you can clap. Yeah, that's awesome. I was beaming that day, and I was so grateful to the Lord for just doing that. And so then later the year after, we got married, and then we ended up having Rain, and a few years later Arkin, and then Rowan. So now we have 4 kids now, which if I look tired and gray, it's because of them. So at any rate, so to kind of wrap up, I grew up feeling very lonely and very I just was trying to escape everything I possibly could. Any type of mildly bad feeling, I was trying to escape it in any way I could. And I did it through whatever was around and whatever was available. And then God shifted things in my life. And he took everything that I thought I wanted, and everything that I thought I needed, and everything that I thought was going to be the thing that I needed to do to escape, and made me realize that I didn't actually need to escape. I just had to look to him. And he gave me, and by doing that, just by looking to him, just consistently, I walked around, when I was quitting smoking, I walked around with, of course, no, okay, there, with this Bible verse in my wallet, and every time I wanted a cigarette, I read this, I would take this out of my wallet instead and read it. In 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. I lived that verse for multiple years as I was trying to remove this stuff, and realizing that God was the one who was able to help me get away from it and to remove it. And so just recognizing that a lot of the things that were a struggle for me in the past, when I kept my eyes on God, he put all those things that I was hoping for in place, and he put them right, and he gave me the right versions of it. Bad relationships with girls, he gave me an amazing wife. I was going to say perfect for a second, but that's not true either. But he gave me an amazing wife and amazing kids And he gave me a right relationship with him. And he gave me really good, close friends that I can look to. And I can, if there's, I can have accountability partners, even the ones who get like the random accountability at messages that don't make sense, and they can joke about it. And I'm very grateful for that. And so, yeah, I was really trying to figure out how to end this. I don't really remember how to do that at this point. I'll just keep rambling on, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to pray and end it. Lord, we thank you for just this time again. And I'm thankful for your transformative work, Lord. I'm so grateful that you work in our lives, that you transform us from the inside to look more like you. Lord, I just want to take the time, Lord, that if there's anybody in here who doesn't know you, that if they're walking kind of that same, line of like, I trying to figure out if they can do it on their own, and recognizing that everything's kind of a shadow or an imitation, Lord, of what you can provide. I pray that you open their eyes and help them recognize that. And I pray that you help us all to draw near to you and recognize that through you, Lord, there's fulfillment. And you're the only thing that really can bring true fulfillment. And I'm so grateful for that and what you do and what you've done. And yeah, I pray that you'll bless our time the rest of this evening and our conversations, Lord. In your name, amen. Thanks, everybody.